Welcome to Free Media. I'm Robby Soave, joined by Niall Stanage and Amber Duke. My friends, nice to see you both.
Good to see you.
Good to be back.
All right, let's get to it. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not letting up. The Republican congresswoman who recently announced she would retire in a few weeks told 60 Minutes that Trump's GOP allies make fun of him behind his back. Don't think he's going to appreciate that. Let's watch.
I'm going to ask you about this almost solid support he has among Republicans in Congress. Is there in that support fear? Does the support come about because they're afraid that they'll get death threats?
I think they're terrified to step out of line and get a nasty Truth Social post on them. Yes.
And they're watching what happened to you.
Yes.
Behind the scenes, do they talk differently?
Yes.
How?
Oh, it would shock people.
Well, let's shock people.
Okay. I watched many of my colleagues go from making fun of him, making fun of how he talks, making fun of me constantly for supporting him, to when he won the primary in 2024, they all started, excuse my language, Leslie, kissing his ass and decided to put on a MAGA hat for the first time.
Trump hit back at MTG on Truth Social, calling her Marjorie Taylor Greene and Marjorie Taylor Brown, and said he was furious with 60 Minutes for airing the interview, even though CBS is under new and supposedly more friendly ownership. Which takes us to our next topic, the possible acquisition of Warner Brothers by Netflix, a deal that is likely going to be scrutinized by Trump. Watch this.
Should they be allowed to buy Warner Brothers? Should Netflix?
Well, that's the question. They have a very big market share. And when they have Warner Brothers, that share goes up a lot. So I don't know. That's going to be for some economists to tell. And also, and I'll be involved in that decision too. They have a very big market share.
Did he make any guarantees to you about the merger if they do merge?
No, not at all. He came up. He was in the Oval Office last week. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a great person. But he's done one of the greatest jobs in the history of movies and other things. He's got a lot of interesting things happening aside from what you're talking about. But it is a big market share. There's no question about it. It could be a problem. Yes.
But Netflix is not the only interested party. Paramount, which now owns CBS, is making a bid to acquire Warner Brothers as well. Watch this.
But now WBD is up near $30 a share, and that's how much Paramount is offering for the entire company, including CNN. This is an attempt to go over the top and to defeat Netflix, which has offered to pay $27 and change per share for just Warner Brothers and HBO, for just the movie studio and the streaming service part of the house. Paramount is basically saying that it is making a superior all-cash offer and going directly to shareholders in what's known as a hostile takeover bid, and letting investors decide what to do with the future of the company. Here's Paramount CEO David Ellison speaking about it this morning.
We're sitting on Wall Street where cash is still king. We are offering shareholders $17.6 billion more cash than the deal that they currently have signed up with Netflix. And we believe when they see what is currently in our offer, that's what they'll vote for.
So this deal is really interesting, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's spend a little bit of time on our friend Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has this increasingly very sad, strained relationship with Donald Trump, where they're both speaking of it in terms of like a really bad ex, which is kind of how she seemed to interpret it. They're falling out in the beginning, and he's leaned into that as well.
He's using the word jilted about her,
right,
which is part of that whole vibe.
And I mean, I think she is taking it very personally. I feel sorry for her to be so estranged from someone that she admires so much. I know, Niall, you've become a big MTG fan in recent weeks.
Let's not get carried...
Big fan. You should see him in his MTG T-shirt and flag.
Let's not get carried away here,
Yes.
Robby. Now, I do think that she does make some legitimate points when she gets into the substance of her objection. It's a lot about Trump getting distracted from what she sees, I think, as the America First agenda. Now, as is well known, I'm not a particular fan of the America First agenda, but I think that is a reasonable critique to level that there has been a shift away from that kind of populism. Elsewhere in that 60 Minutes interview, she talked about the fact that, let me get this the right way around, MAGA is a Trump label, but she considers herself America First, which is a distinction that she's drawing, I think, between some sort of conservative populism, which she believes in, and what she has come to see, I think, as a more cultish or slavish devotion to Trump.
Yeah.
And I think that's legitimate, and I thought her point about Republican politicians contorting themselves into more pro-Trump positions was also valid.
Yeah, that was the part of what she was saying. I mean, I did agree. I think it's just obviously fair. You've probably encountered people like this. I certainly have. Republicans who now know they can't dare make fun of Trump or be against Trump, sound, vigorously pro-Trump the man, not just Trumpism, but love Trump. But we know behind closed doors, mock him just as much as Democrats and mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, the neoconservatives and the libertarians and the Republican Party are still there. They didn't magically just become America First or MAGA.
Right.
They're just keeping some of those views a little tucked under the surface because they don't want to anger Trump, who is the most popular person in the Republican Party. I mean, for good reason, obviously. He's the president.
Right.
But, I mean, I think we saw a hint of it actually during that bipartisan border bill fight that took place during the Biden presidency, where James Lankford was sort of instructed by Mitch McConnell to go negotiate this deal with the Democrats to send a bill to Biden's desk that, from the more conservative immigration restrictionist view, would have just been a processing bill and not really a border security bill like H.R. 2 was. And then Trump was like, no, this bill's terrible. What are you guys doing? As was a large portion of the America First movement, as Marjorie Taylor Greene calls it. And the bill ended up dying. But the fact that Republican senators were willing to do that shows that that sort of Gang of Eight view on immigration is still very much alive and well. They just try to keep it tucked away from Trump's leering eyes when he's in power.
Let me ask you this, Amber. I've actually been waiting to ask you this all week. There is a narrative forming. There's a New York Times column by Michelle Goldberg about it that some of this GOP frustration with Trump is specifically coming from the female members of the GOP constituency from MTG. Nancy Mace, Elise Stefanik now is a little bit estranged from leadership from Mike Johnson. And they're using they have made it a little bit about them all being women to some degree. And I know you have mixed views on women in politics overall.
What does that mean?
Amber's against women in politics.
Yeah, I know you want to...
I'm going to just take my leave now.
Drive the gender back into the kitchen. Is it a women versus male leadership thing at all? That is the framing the mainstream media is going with.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think probably it's more about Mike Johnson, actually, because Elise Stefanik had that big blow up with Mike Johnson last week, and Trump was the one who moderated the call between them, where they sort of hashed it out, apparently. And Trump hasn't given any sign that he's willing to abandon Mike Johnson yet, and so I think this sort of frustration among these three women with the speakership is perhaps seeping out into broader frustration with Trump. Obviously, MTG is slightly a separate case. But Stefanik, now running for New York governor, hasn't received Trump's endorsement yet. And there's a sort of no-name challenger by the name of Blakeman.
Oh, right. And Trump said they're both great.
Yeah. And so
she's getting thrown under the bus. Is that what that seems like?
Well, and I think it's kind of funny because she was not a Trump person.
Right.
She ended up basically selling out to become this huge MAGA acolyte, which I never bought. I wrote a piece about it.
She's exactly the kind of person MTG actually is describing.
When she replaced Liz Cheney to be the House Conference Chair, I pointed out that I had a lot of criticisms of Liz Cheney and the Cheney family generally, but her voting record with Trump was way better than Elise Stefanik's at the time. So it's like, what are we doing? And then she, of course, leveraged that into trying to become the UN ambassador, and then her nomination was pulled at the last minute. I also just want to point out as well that a lot of people were saying that she kind of knew it was coming and she was happy to leave because she was preparing to run for governor of New York. I was relatively close with some of her staff members at the time who were literally packing everything up to move up to New York and prepping for the first day of the UN Security Council meetings, and General Assembly meetings. I don't think that she actually really knew that they were going to end up shipping her that way.
Yeah.
When it comes to Elise Stefanik, I probably shouldn't tell the story, but we're here now among friends.
Let's do it.
Years ago, before she was elected to Congress, I was sitting in the Hill newsroom, and there was a person whose name I won't give, but her first name was Elise, and the last name was somewhat Germanic or Nordic or whatever, and no one had heard of Elise Stefanik. And our Elise answered the phone, and as she later related to me, the person said, Elise, and she said yes. And this person from the Republican Party, I can't remember which committee, immediately started selling our Elise on running for Congress.
Oh my gosh.
And eventually she said, I think you have the wrong person there.
Oh my
And a few
God.
months later, Elise Stefanik was a rising star in the
Wow.
Republican Party.
And she was really involved with Maverick PAC, which was run by Cory Gardner at the time, who was very much like a more moderate GOP guy. So that really was the way she branded herself when she first entered Congress.
Much more moderate than she now positions
yeah.
herself by a long way.
But I did see, for instance, some criticism, going back to the point I was just making, of MTG. She's retiring, not even serving out the whole term.
Yeah, I don't like that.
For instance, Mike Cernovich brought that up, and then she kind of lashed out at him as like, why are you saying,
She crashed out over that.
Yeah, so I don't know. What do we make of that? That seemed...
I do think
she could
it's 2
finish out the
years.
term,
like,
right?
grow up, finish out the term.
Yeah.
I don't buy the whole like death threats thing. I mean, are you really telling me that you're getting more death threats now than you were when you entered Congress and people were criticizing you for like the Jewish space lasers comments? Death threats are part of the job, sadly now, and I
Right.
know political violence in the past year has been escalated to an extent,
Right.
but like. You get death threats, I get
Yep.
death threats, I'm sure you do too.
Yep.
From both sides of the Atlantic sometimes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not surprised to hear that. And
Right.
it just feels like a convenient excuse.
One of the only, to my mind, measurable ways you can find a statistical increase in something approaching political violence is, yes, threats against members of Congress have discernibly increased,
Right.
but threats.
Yeah,
not
how many
carried out
how many-
actions.
or credible
not-
threats. That's the other
Right.
thing.
Right, not
People
everyone...
like to talk smack online.
No, I know. This is like an uncomfortable truth, but it is true that you can virtually always disregard crazy people saying things about you online.
Let me go into my defense of Marjorie Taylor
Go
Greene just
for
one
it.
more time.
Here we
Go
go.
for it.
Is there not, though, a point? I mean, obviously, I'm not privy to what threats she ever
Right.
did receive or is receiving now. But is the perception that she has, quote unquote, betrayed Trump
Right.
not likely to inflame people to a greater degree than here's a right-wing Republican saying right-wing Republican things? Know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but
I wonder if maybe it feels amplified to her because it's coming from her side of the aisle.
yeah.
Possibly.
I mean, she might be someone, I mean, I've had this experience too. Well, we've all had the experience of every now and then you have a take or a disagreement with your side and or with who your audience perceives you to be on social media, and what happens is you get attacked. Like just yesterday I tweeted something contrary to like some kind of America First nationalist labor policy, and I'm being screamed at on people on social media because I guess my audience is probably more right-leaning than it is left-leaning. If my audience was left-leaning and I said something bad about socialism, then those people would attack me. So yeah, going against what your people want to hear does result in very swift, immediate, and voluminous negative feedback. That's not the same thing as saying you're in any actual danger. Is what I would say. Now, Trump reacted to this whole interview with like, rage on Truth Social, saying that he's obviously very mad at Marjorie Taylor Brown.
I don't think that's one of his
thinks
better
it's
names.
No, it was
not
really,
good at all.
he needed to workshop that one a little longer.
It's like a green apple turning brown or something.
Or like grass dying.
Yeah, that was not a good one. He was very proud of it because he repeated it a couple times
Yeah.
too. Like, no, you gotta.
Well,
work on
he's
that one.
workshopping it, but once he sees this episode, he's
Right.
gonna come up with a new
Yeah,
one.
Marjorie Taylor Greene that's acceptable.
Because he said
that's
once,
the bare minimum.
he said once
effort.
at a rally that he uses the rallies as like ways to workshop nicknames, and he's like, okay, cheer if you like this one.
Yeah.
And so I think that post was like, we're gonna try this Brown thing, and maybe if it doesn't work, I'll come up with something else.
But he was so mad at 60 Minutes for doing the interview. I thought the interview was fine and fair. She's a prominent person right now. It's true that you can always get criticism for being a Republican who now suddenly disagrees with what Trump or the Republican Party is doing, and the mainstream media will like endlessly put you on TV about it. But she's in the news. It's an important interviewer. I don't know. It was fine. I don't know. I don't have any problem with it.
She is still a sitting member of Congress. She's a very prominent member. She represents a particular strand of opinion. And she's one of those people who, out of 435 members of Congress, how many are really known to a wide swathe of the public?
Yeah.
10, 15 maybe? And she's definitely in that category. So it seems to me a completely legitimate thing to do. And I thought the conduct of the interview was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with an independent I'm going to criticize mainstream media outlets, but I don't want them to be like afraid to ever interview someone who's critical of Trump, and especially from a previously Trump-friendly, like probably in her view, she wishes Trump would do more of the things she's saying, and that would be better for the Republican Party.
It's just objectively newsy.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be an idiot to not take that interview.
Yeah. So here we are now with these potential merger deals. Netflix wants to buy Warner Brothers. It's even difficult to keep straight who falls under what's umbrella, because that deal would not include CNN. But if Paramount were to acquire Warner Brothers, then it would include CNN, and CNN and CBS would be under the same umbrella, this same umbrella that includes the Ellisons and Barry Weiss, and is ostensibly friendlier to Trump. Now, interestingly enough, in the clip talking about this, Trump didn't necessarily say anything bad about Netflix's leadership. He said he's basically impressed with what they've done, and they'll look into it, and is kind of leaving it open. I certainly wouldn't want the business decision to hinge on like who sucks up to Trump more or who Trump thinks is better for the Trump administration. That's just like very deeply violating my core beliefs. He didn't explicitly say that's how it's going to be. I don't know.
I'm not sure how much reassurance I take from that, given his.
You think they're gonna? Oh, I would. No, they would. Well, it's in their best interest now to.
Right.
We're gonna be so cool with you, Trump, if ours is allowed to go through. I'd say that's why this is a bad system.
Yeah, well, also he's the most transactional person in the world, right? So, I mean, obviously, not only will they be trying to placate him or ingratiate themselves with him, he will be, I suspect, eagerly playing one off against the other to see who will do the most to ingratiate him. And he has the Department of Justice there with its anti-monopoly, I can't remember exactly what that wing of the DOJ is called, but the part that polices monopoly policies.
But that's a beloved pastime of the left as well.
Yes.
If it was them in charge, they'd just be emphasizing, the bigness and the merger.
Diversity of ownership.
Yes.
It's interesting. I mean, I would think that the MTG interview kind of cuts against the criticism that the previous Paramount Skydance merger was only approved by Trump because they promised to be nice to him. I mean, he's mad at them again. So like, who cares?
Yeah.
But
I mean, Barry Weiss she does run criticism of criticism you don't like of Trump's foreign policy.
Well, she just hired Tony DeCoppel, and then the other guy who was like saying that the text messages between the Charlie Kirk assassin and his boyfriend were like really sweet or something. I don't know. It was weird.
That's weird.
But I mean, the market share thing is more interesting to me because I was actually coincidentally driving into work with my husband earlier this week, and he likes to listen to CNBC radio in the morning. And it was while David Ellison was doing this long interview about the potential hostile takeover. And his point was, well, if Netflix takes over Warner Brothers and HBO Max, and we were to take over Warner Brothers, HBO Max, and CNN, our deal would still result in a lower market share for us than Netflix's deal. And so that's why they're making that appeal to the antitrust division and the shareholders, which is that it would be easier to get through. But I also wanted to bring up, because I think this is sort of tangentially related, these Supreme Court oral arguments about whether or not Trump has the executive power to fire the chairman of the FTC, this Slaughter case. I don't know if either of you were watching those yesterday, but feel free to pick up on anything I said about the actual market share, and then I'd love to talk about that a bit.
I think the shareholders should make what they think is the best deal for them, for the company, and you can see probably merit to both cases. I'm not particularly worried that if Paramount wins, it will suddenly be that there's no criticism of Trump or Republicans allowed on CBS and CNN. I don't particularly have that fear. I think it would be kind of weird for CNN and CBS to have the same ownership, but we work for a company that The Hill and News Nation are both under Nexstar's ownership, and they're kind of distinct products, and you can find lots of different examples of that. So I'm not really worried about it either way. If I was, I wouldn't be worried about the news all being too pro-Trump if Paramount wins, but I also wouldn't be worried like if Netflix wins that this is some blow to Trump's media strategy. I guess what I would be thinking.
I mean, it's not.
It seems to me it doesn't matter because the media is so fragmented now, and it speaks to my broader agenda, I guess. But it's just like, who owns what? Lots of dollars at stake, huge companies. But we are still living through a time of increased flourishing of different perspectives and alternate media shows and environments and platforms, and that is just clearly not going to die off as a result of this either way, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's certainly true that the number of media choices you have seems to be proliferating all the time because
we're drowning in them now.
Yeah, we have too much information. We need less information,
Yeah.
I think. But and nor is the point that if Paramount won this deal, there'd only be, pro-Trump propaganda put out. But from my perspective, the fear, I think, is that you have a president who I think is unarguably more thin-skinned and publicly so about criticism than most of his predecessors, and more willing to use the levers of government for his own political benefit. And so when you have, potentially at least, a company and an individual in David Ellison trying to add control of CNN to CBS News, that, I think, does raise legitimate dangers about those things being nudged in a different way, not out of any highfalutin journalistic ethical idea, but to curry favour with the president.
Yeah. Well, in the case you mentioned, which I haven't followed super closely, but that would be an area where I'm probably more friendly or favorable to whatever the Trump administration's perspective is. I'm happy to have them fire those regulators if they're not going along.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there was a moment that went viral from this case with a line of questioning from Ketanji Brown Jackson, and her. The issue she posited to the lawyers making their oral arguments was effectively that the government needs experts in positions that are independent from executive power and cannot be fired, like your favorite, Dr. Anthony Fauci, which sort of creates this unelected fourth branch of government that can never be held accountable,
That's the problem.
And I found it really kind of telling and disturbing that
revealing of the ideology of the state.
And it was especially disturbing because this woman, Rebecca Slaughter, who was fired from the FTC, is ostensibly not really an expert. She did like a year at a law firm before becoming a policy advisor to Chuck Schumer for 9 years, and then was placed on the FTC. So it's not like she's a brain surgeon and like the only person who can use the specific scalpel. She is very much like a card-carrying political hack who just happens to have a law degree. And so, like, even comparing her to Fauci, I think, is unfair to Dr. Fauci.
He had like 50 years of service in the government. All right, we'll leave it there for now, but we've got more free media coming up. Another great block of news for you. Stick around.